Hi, my name is Mark Ryan. Today I'm going to talk you through how to configure InTune to deploy SCEP certificates to devices, how we tie those to Kerberos tickets to give us single sign-on for iOS devices into Active Directory. A couple of different options that are available to us provided by Apple, and we'll run through a bit of diagnostics on how all that hangs together and how we deploy this in an enterprise. So a bit of a deployment setup configuration for my architecture here. I've got my mobile devices. What I'm going to do is I'm going to enroll those mobile devices into Azure, into InTune. As part of that enrollment, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to connect to our certificate server. Certificate server is going to give us the SCEP certificate, the simple certificate enrollment protocol, to deploy that certificates. And as part of that, it's going to connect to the domain controller. The domain controller is the certificate authority, so it'll get those certificates from there. We'll push down the root CA as well, and then we'll do some authentication. My Apache server here is a CentOS Apache server. And we'll do Kerberos authentication to that. And then subsequently, we'll deploy Zscaler app and do the authentication to Zscaler app for Zscaler Internet Access, Zscaler Private Access against the ADFS server. So a bit of a run through of those. What we'll do is we'll do two different mechanisms for authentication. We'll enroll with one. We'll show that working. Then we'll remove that, we'll restart the device, and then we'll enroll with the other one and show you the distinction between the two, and then show you that transparent single sign-on. Okay, so let's move away from that. What I will do is I'll quickly run you through where we are with InTune and the configurations that we've got. So we've got a couple of configuration profiles, as I said. The first one is the root CA. This is just my the root CA for my Active Directory. Then as part of that, I've got my SCEP configuration. And the SCEP configuration is really important to make sure we get these parameters right. So we need a subject, which is the canonical name, is the user principal name. It also needs to have a subject alternative name, one being the UPN and one being the email address. The key usage must be key encipherment and digital signature, 2048-bit, and this is where we tie the root certificate to the SCEP profile. And then we need a couple of things. We need client authentication and this specific OID, Kerberos client authentication, this specific OID, server authentication with this OID, and smart card login with this OID. And then we configure the SCEP server URL there. Now I am also using the client connector, which connects my on-premise certificate server to Azure AD to be able to issue those certificates. And then I assign this to the specific group, the SCEP users group. And then I've got these two Kerberos profiles. The SCEP the Kerberos SSO one, Apple introduced Kerberos single sign-on in I think about iOS 8. If we look at the configuration settings for this under single sign-on, it's relatively simple. We'd apply the Kerberos principal name is the SAM account name. It's not fully qualified. It's really important that this is correct. It's a SAM account name. And the realm is my Active Directory domain. And so you can see the SAM account name at the realm gives you your user principal name. And then URL prefixes, you specify those, and you also need to specify the protocol. So HTTP start@wellsgeek.net, HTTPS start@wellsgeek.net, and I've also included the autologon.microsoft.azure.ad.sso.com for Kerberos authentication to Azure AD. Basically what these are saying is if I connect to any of these URLs, everything that matches these URLs, and they send a 401 authenticate negotiate challenge, then the client should send its Kerberos ticket. And then I also need to, I made a mistake there, tie the renewal certificate, the SCEP certificate, to that. And we'll click Save on that, and that profile is all good. So we come back to these device configurations and we look at the SSO extension. So this is what Apple introduced in iOS 13, takes it a step further. It's an extension from their previous configuration. So we'll take a look into this. And now we configure it under the single sign-on extension here. So this time we configure it as Kerberos. The realm is welshgeek.net. And you notice it doesn't have any UPN information here. It's just saying, okay, we're going to figure out the domain dynamically and the username dynamically. And in this case, it's now, instead of configuring a protocol and a wildcard, or a protocol and an FQDN, we just essentially need the wildcard, but it's important, two things. First one, you don't need the star, but you do need the preceding dot here. So here I'm saying anything that is .welshgeek.net, we will, if that challenges with authenticate, negotiate 401 challenge, then I will send my Kerberos ticket. You have some extra configuration parameters in here. Do we want to save those passwords to the keychain? Do we need the user to actually be physically present, either with a touch ID or a face ID or passcode as a credential to be able to get that Kerberos ticket? As in, will it try and get Kerberos tickets in the background whilst the machine is locked? There's a couple of things. If you're using multiple Kerberos extensions, you might need to set a default realm. And this is the interesting one. This is the site auto discovery. And this is the real change for me between this version of SSO and the iOS version 8 version of SSO, because iOS version 8, the previous configuration I showed you, effectively does a lookup for the KDC and then tries to connect to the KDC. And if you're a big organization with, 50, 60, 100 domain controllers, all of those could be the KDC, and some of them might not be the optimal one to connect to. Whereas site discovery is a functionality provided by Microsoft that basically says, okay, well, what Active Directory or what location am I in, and what domain controller is in that location? So if I'm in London, I will enumerate the London domain controllers, and that's a much smaller list. It might only be 5 domain controllers. If I'm in New York, then the 5 domain controllers in New York, same for Hong Kong, or wherever your domain controllers are. So the site discovery enables a much smaller, much tighter selection of domain controllers to be identified and connected to. And as part of this enrollment, we'll do the diagnostics and show what's going on there. Here we've got the principal name, which ties the user to it. So this is my on-premise SAM account name. Slightly different configuration to the previous one because we're using dynamic variables. You could tie this to anything that you like. And if you wanted to kind of override this site order discovery, you could actually tie to a specific site here. So the site order discovery uses, again, a DNS SRV lookup. We could override that here and say, well, let's just assume that we are in site London and always tie users to London if that LDAP connection doesn't work. We can specify specific bundles that are allowed to use it, so tie only specific applications to be able to get Kerberos tickets. We've got more functionality in there. And if you do have other realms, we can create a custom realm mapping, as Microsoft tell you, most administrators don't need to tie this here. And this is where I tie the certificate, the SCEP certificate, to this authentication profile. So basically, when I go to get my Kerberos ticket, the SCEP certificate is going to be used to connect to the KDC or provided to the KDC as my seed for authentication. So that's all good. We've got all those configured. So as we showed, if we come back here, this one is excluded for ZApp users. So for the first instance, we're going to deploy this one, which is the iOS version 8, and SCEP users will get it, which is all users that are part of this demonstration. But but we won't get this SSO extension one because we're excluding it. So I'm just using the group membership to deploy one, and then I'll change the groups around and we'll deploy the other one. So I hope that's clear. So what I'll do is I'll flick across to my QuickTime player here, which is actually showing you the screen on my iPad, and we'll walk through the enrollment process. So what we'll do is we'll launch the company portal, which is the app provided by Microsoft. We'll sign in here. We'll go, okay, great. We're not enrolled. So let's start the enrollment process. We click begin, gives us a couple of details about what enrolling in an MDM means. So we click continue, and it's going to say, right, I want to go off and download that management profile. So it connects to the Microsoft portal, does a couple of things, identifies and downloads the profile. So I click allow, click close on that. We can click continue. And now what we need to do, while that's running, is open up here. We've got the profile downloaded, and we'll click install. And I have to enter my passcode to do that. So now it's validated who I am, and it's going to install this profile. It's quite happy with that. We click install, we click trust, and away we go. Okay, we're done. So let's come back across this company portal. We click continue, and it says, great, you've installed the profile, and now it's going to go through and check all of those settings. Now, at the same time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to flick across to my domain controller over here. This domain controller is hosting a number of services. It's hosting the certificate server. It's also hosting some VMs, which are the certificate server and the ADFS server, so and the Apache server. So if we start a packet capture on here, it'll actually capture quite a lot of data. One would hope. Let's just make sure we set this up, and we'll double check the IP address on this iPad. It's now changed 122, and we'll click start on this. So as this completes its enrollment, it's going off, and it's going to get its SCEP certificates and everything as part of this. We'll click done over here, and let's take a look at what this profile looks like. You can see it's slowly enrolling. It has picked up its SCEP certificates. It's picked up the Kerberos SSO, so all app IDs for those domains that we created there. And it's also connected the Zscaler VPN profile for Zscaler app. And here are my SCEP certificates that we've enrolled, the Welsh Geek, root CA, and everything there. So the profile has been managed, it's been pushed down. So if I open up my Apache browser now, and I browse to, my Safari browser, and I browse to apache.welshgeek.net, see I've got access to the web server, it signed me in, and we'll take a look and show exactly what was going on there. So I'm going to click stop on this. And let's take a look at tcp.port is 80, which is the web server. You can see that I did a get, a 401 unauthorized. It says authenticate, negotiate, and then we did another get that included the SP-NIGO. So let's take a look at DNS and TCP port 88. So it gives a little bit more detail on what's going on. So here was the first GET request, and obviously we got a challenge. So the thing that my machine did, so the iPad did, is it did a lookup for _Kerberos to _TCP patchy.wellsgeek.net. So it built that from the realm, and it goes, okay, well, I'm going to query the top of the realm. Give me the KDC, and the KDC is this server here, 1.2, and so we try to get a Kerberos ticket. It says pre-auth required, and then it says here, okay, let's get another request, but this time we sent our authentication data as part of as part of that request. We sent the SCEP certificate, and it validated the SCEP certificate and issued me the ticket granting ticket on the iPad. And then subsequently to that, there's another request. Let's close this down slightly. And this request says, okay, give me the ticket, service ticket for HTTP apache.wellsgeek.net. And obviously it's sent across the ticket granting ticket with that. And then it got issued with the service ticket, which it then presented to the web server. So we can see that all of that works fine. So SCEP deployment. And why is this important to Zscaler? Well, it's important because once you've got certificates deployed, I can go ahead here and I can launch the Zscaler app. I've already deployed the Zscaler configuration as part of the management profile, which means that I can now get transparent Kerberos authentication to enroll Zscaler app, which is great. Zscaler app is now transparently enrolled, transparently authenticated. The user didn't have to do anything once after they'd configured everything. So let's take a slightly different view on this. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to move over from my Wi-Fi network and I'm going to connect to my personal hotspot. That takes me off network. We'll come back over here. We'll close that browser down because we're not worried about that. And of course, Zscaler app is still running here. Reboot the iPad, because rebooting the iPad is the simplest way of clearing out all of the Kerberos tickets. So we'll reboot it, double check this. There we go. We get prompted for the passcode. So the iPad has restarted. Let's take a look at Zscaler app. Obviously, connecting via the iPhone is not the best performance. So now if we go to that apache.wellsgeek.net, it's now going to go and get all those Kerberos tickets over Zscaler Private Access. So if we refresh this page now, 12:57, here's the request. Here are the tickets that we saw. The first one that was the first request. The second one to get me the ticket granting ticket. The third one to get me the service ticket. And the fourth one to display the Apache web server. A little bit longer than I expected to get those certificates through, the log lines through. So we're all good with the process there. So let's do a couple of things. We're going to close that down. We're going to come to my general settings, and I'm going to remove that management profile because I'm not interested in that, and enter my passcode again to remove it. We'll click remove. Whilst that's going, we'll obviously sign out of Zscaler app as well. We'll close that down. We'll come to the company portal. This will have figured out that I've removed the access. So we'll kill that for now. And what I'm also going to do, get back to first principles, is I'm going to restart that device. Now, I'm going to come back across to my configuration here whilst all of that is restarting, and we'll make a change. We'll move from the iOS 8 version, and we'll come into here. We'll say all users, and we'll exclude the Z app users. So we'll specifically exclude this profile. I'm only doing this because it's easier than deleting the profile. And we'll look at the SSO extension one. We'll edit the assignments on this. And we want this assigned to the SCEP users. And we'll remove the exclusion there. And click Save. So SCEP users get this profile, and anybody that's in the ZApp users doesn't get this profile. So that's all up and running. So what we'll do is we'll flick over to the iPad. What we will do is we will click sign in. We'll sign in with this one. Click continue. We'll go a bit faster on this one as we go through. So we begin, continue, click continue. Click allow, click close. Come over here, here's the profile. We'll click install and enter the passcode. Click install. Install and trust. So that's going to install. Whilst that's going on, what we're going to do is we'll flick across to this domain controller that we had set up before. And we'll start this packet capture. And we'll click done. And we'll see this this profile getting installed as it goes on in the background. We can now click continue, continue. And that's going to go down and install all of those profiles. So we'll start to see those the root CA get installed, and there we go. There's the SCEP certificate that gets installed as part of the InTune. We've got the root certificate installed. You can see it's installed the VPN profile here, the SCEP certificates for my domain controller, and here's the Kerberos single sign-on profile that was created. If we come back here, it's probably going to say it's completed as well. So we're all good for that. So if we jump across to this domain controller, we can see probably not very much. TCP port 80, DNS port 88, nothing going on port 389 either. So let's go ahead and launch our browser, and let's go to apache.wellsgeek.net, which displays fine, and see what the changes are. So here we see the get, we see the 401 negotiate authenticate challenge, but at this point it does an LDAP lookup, _LDAP _TCP wellsgeek.net. And so what it's querying for is obviously the LDAP servers in the domain, but once it gets that list back and it's saying, okay, here's my domain controller, obviously I've only got one in my directory, but it then says, right, I'm going to do an LDAP connection. Now, a Windows machine would do a CLDAP, a connectionless LDAP, LDAP over UDP. Apple have implemented this as a TCP LDAP connection. Doesn't really matter. Really what it's saying is, I'm going to bind, and it's going to say, give me a search request, and it's going to say, I want to talk to the wellsgeek.net domain. That's the realm that we provided, and I want to know what servers are available that can process my net logon request. And the response back is, well, okay, I've seen your client IP address, so I know that your site is in England, and there is a server in England, as in an Active Directory domain controller in England. So that's the one that you should talk to, and that is dc2.wellsgeek.net. So it's actually a bit like server load balancing. It's saying what is the closest domain controller that's available for me in the site that you've seen me from. So at that point, we do the SRV lookup against that domain controller and say, okay, well, I know my site is in England because I got that from the LDAP request _ Kerberos _ TCP England _ sites/geek.net. So which Kerberos, which KDCs are in the England site in this domain that can actually authenticate me? So it's a much tighter list. And then we go through. Here's my request for the ticket granting ticket. Where I send the SCEP certificate across, and it says pre-auth required. Sorry, here is the one where it sends the SCEP certificate across. We get the response, and we get all the tickets back. So a much tighter, much more controlled and deterministic view, and then we do the GET request, and the Kerberos ticket is sent across in there. So there we have it. Much tighter control with the SSO extension than you get with just the iOS 8 SCEP profile. A couple of things which worth looking at. Here is the Microsoft document around configuring Intune to support SCEP. It's a very detailed document in terms of how to install and configure it, how to use your own certificates and PKS, private key infrastructure, deploy there. And this tech community post here is really detailed in terms of deploying Microsoft Certificate Server, how to configure it, and set it up to work with Microsoft Intune for deploying to devices. Doesn't quite cover the piece in terms of the Kerberos process, but it's well worth reviewing that in terms of the configuration. A couple of other updates that are worth looking at. Now, let's go back to private access, and we'll click close on this. What I'm going to do, just to make sure I clear things out, we're going to restart this device, because I always think it's important to start from first principles. So this device will restart, and it won't have any Kerberos tickets cached or anything like that because it's been through the restart. And we'll show the same process working. We'll show the same process working with directory and through Zscaler Private Access. There we go, we're back online. So everything is obviously still set up. So if we launch Zscaler app, launch. There we go. Maybe I'm just a little bit impatient. Okay, so we've shown that Zscaler app does the SAML authentication and Kerberos authentication, so we get the transparent enrollment. Again, to get back to first principles and clear all those Kerberos tickets out, we're going to reboot it again. Obviously, you don't need to do this in a normal environment, but I want to show you this all from first principles. So this device will restart now. And when it does restart, I'm going to connect it to my mobile device for its Wi-Fi connection. So it's restarted and it's tethered to my iPhone now. So we're totally off the corporate network. We can see this here, Mark's iPhone here on the left. Launch Zscaler app. It'll show it's connecting. Obviously, it's a little bit slower because it's tethered to a mobile device. And away we go. So I should now be able to well, get the ADFS server, but let's go to the Apache server. Again, this is going through Zscaler Private Access now, and we get the Kerberos ticket and everything flowing through there. And if we take a look at the diagnostics here, let's give it a short second to restart. So here are the transactions, 1455. We saw the request to the Apache server. We see the 3 transactions through to the domain controller, and we see these the request back to the Apache server to deliver the content. So we have all of the transparent authentication working both on the iPad with iOS, talking to the ADFS server for the sign-on process, and then once we're enrolled in Zscaler app for Zscaler Private Access, all of the authentication passes through with much closer site enumeration based on the those connections through the ZPA app connector. Hope this was useful. Any questions, please email me, mark@zscaler.com. Thank you.